In this video, I wanted to look at applying this a parallel finishing to some of these other geometries and look at the end result, and also look at some of the other, we'll look at the horizontal finishing operation and how that can help clean up certain areas of other geometry. To start, I'm going to select my parallel finishing pass, and I'm going to go ahead and Control C, Control V, or I could right click and copy and paste. With this new operation, I'm going to double click and I'm going to do a remove all and then select curve edge regions. With this one, I'm going to select the edges of each of these other geometries and hit enter or right mouse. And now I'm also, just to exaggerate or highlight some of the problem areas, I'm going to increase my step over again to I'm going to just say 0.1, and now I'll generate. And if I select my setup, and now if we simulate to the end here, just take a minute, but there. What you'll notice as we look at some of the other geometries we have is that if I turn off the toolpath visibility, you can see that the surface finish with the parallel finishing, it tends to be a little cleaner where that parallel line is actually traveling with the slope of the geometry, but then as it starts to cut across the slope, the surface definition is a little more rough. And so you can see that condition as we look at all of the different objects here, and you can see where there's a vertical wall with the parallel finishing that it really gives you a rough surface quality. Same thing here if we look at these cone shapes. The sides of these cones have a really rough surface. In this, to get more definition on vertical walls, that's where the horizontal finishing will really be helpful. And so with those same regions selected, I'm going to go up to machining operations and look at and make a 3-axis horizontal finishing pass to try to come back through and clean up some of those other edges. For now, I'm going to try to use the same tool that I've been using for my parallel finishing, the 1/2 inch ball end mill. The feeds and speeds I can load from tool. They should be the same as they were before. clearance plane should also be the same. Undercut parameters, there isn't a lot to adjust here, but we usually will get a better or faster result if we change this option to retract to clearance. That'll prevent some extra moves of the machine that are not needed. And usually that's going to be the best option for us. Under cut levels, so this is similar to the parallel finishing step over. Now we want, so how the parallel finishing creates sort of an array of parallel lines, and so the tighter together those lines, the better surface definition you're going to get, but the longer the machine's going to have to run. And with the horizontal finishing, essentially what it's doing is taking slices or contours of the part objects that you're giving it. And again, if you have a really small value, it's going to take lots of really small slices and give you a really smooth surface finish, but it may take longer to do that. Just like with parallel finishing, typically we give it a set distance, and generally we can go smaller with horizontal finishing without adding as much time, simply because while some geometry, a site model for instance, when you're parallel finishing, if you have a really small step over, that step over is applied to potentially a 4 by 8 foot area of machining. So it's the tool has to travel really long distances to cover a small step over. With a small step down for the horizontal finishing, typically our material isn't much thicker than 2 or 4 inches, so there's not as much tool travel, and we can get a pretty nice surface definition without adding tons of time. So I'm going to use a value of 0.03 here, and again, under these other tabs, the optimized machining, the entry exit, and the advanced cut parameters, we don't need to worry about adjusting anything under those. We can just adjust our step down distance and click generate. And now that that's finished, we can see here the result that we get is contours at a 0.03 inch interval that go around the walls of our objects. So what RhinoCAM is doing is it's vertically slicing the geometry that we've given it, and that's going to really clean up nicely some of the vertical surfaces that we have here. And so if I go, if I run our simulation, we can see that the end result of this is going to be cleaning up some of the artifacts or some of the rough surface texture that was left behind by our parallel finishing pass. And so the horizontal finishing is generally going to work better on vertical surfaces. If your parts are pretty much all vertical surfaces, then you could do just a horizontal roughing and a horizontal finishing. But when your geometry is made up of both flat or sloping surfaces and vertical surfaces, you generally may need a combination of parallel finishing and horizontal finishing to get a good result or a good surface finish to your parts. And if we keep looking at the simulation here, you'll see that in most of the cases here, we would need both parallel finishing and a horizontal finishing. These three parts in the back would require both to really get a good definition of these parts. But the front part here really only requires a parallel finishing, and you could probably get away with this cone to just have a horizontal finishing to deal with these walls here after the roughing pass. And that would really give you a much smoother surface finish than the parallel finish would. If I go back out to our program, you can see, so I'm going to zoom in up here and move back to the simulation. So if we look at the end result of our parallel finishing, you can see those really rough edges. And then if we look after the horizontal finishing, I'll toggle off the curves, but all those rough edges are now cleaned up. And that's basically the main use of the horizontal finishing, is to clean up those vertical walls. I'm going to stop there. In the next video, we'll look at some of the other conditions that we're seeing and some of the other operations that we can do to try to further clean some things up. Thanks.